Reckon I was about 6 years old when the stranger came strolling into our little town. Back in those days, I had a job cleaning tables at the local saloon. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid a nickel a day, and patrons would entertain you with drunken stories of unearthed treasures, bloody shootouts, and even the odd ghost tale. Though as the adage goes, nothing is stranger than fiction. The saying held true when one summer day, as I was washing dishes and listening to a patron exaggerate about his brush with Billy the Kid, the door swung open, and in sauntered an intimidating figure. The ominous man was clad in black leather, smelled of desert sun, and dragged a full-sized coffin strapped across his back like a satchel. He stood tall with military posture. His perfectly fitting clothes were likely tailored to his immense, towering stature. 2 revolvers hung off underarm straps between his vest and jacket, and the sawed-off shotgun sat in a holster tied to his left leg. The sight of him caused a rare silence to befall the bar. After a tense moment, he walked up to the front seats, hoisted the coffin off his back, and rested himself against the counter. My boss didn't know what to do. Judging by his face, he was somewhere between running out of there and pissing his pants. Luckily, the stranger ordered a neat whiskey, which prompted John into pouring one from muscle memory, snapping him out of the fit. As a kid, my curiosity could not resist such a moment. I sneaked behind the counter and peeked at the mysterious man. His eyes were hidden by a sliver of shade cast by his wide-brimmed hat. His bristly, unshaven face and sun-tanned, leathery complexion clashed against pale fighting scars covering his cheeks and jaw. His knuckles were calloused over smooth, and for a moment, as he lifted the glass to his gullet, I could swear the man had no fingerprints. Lastly, before the barkeep yanked me away, my gaze fell upon the stranger's peculiar guns. They hung off him, bathed in a black patina, the bizarre make of no mark I recognized, etched in strange symbols and intricate designs, their enormous barrels larger than any caliber I knew of. He finished his drink and leaned in towards John. Then, in a gravelly voice lacking any human inflection, he spoke. "Where can I find Sam Wilkins?" Despite his reserved tone, the bar went silent again, and our conversation garnered an audience. The stranger wasn't vexed by this. He just leaned in even closer and repeated the question once again, this time articulating each word. "Where can I find Sam Wilkins?" "I don't know anyone by that name," John answered, with a tremor in his voice that betrayed his bluff. A tremor which briskly moved itself to his hands, causing him to drop a glass to the floor. Without hesitation, the stranger placed a handful of coin on the counter. Then, with the tip of his hat, he lifted the coffin over his shoulder and left. The typically lively atmosphere never returned to the bar that night. Everyone spoke in hushed tones, warily discussing the queerness of the events and the fidelity of the bar's owner. Our town is small. We all knew Old Man Wilkins, but no one dared speak up. Even I, as a child, knew better than to point a bad omen in the neighbor's direction. The sheriff took a statement, but no harm was done, and the man was nowhere to be found. One could not be arrested on eeriness alone, and a query had to be made before anyone knew if the man was wanted. So, it was left at that. And as quickly as the stranger came, my mind had just as swiftly set it aside for childhood musings. That same night, I awoke around the witching hour and stumbled outside to use the privy. It was a full moon, and the cool night air carried a heavy silence. On the way back to a warm cot, an odd chill hit my spine. Much like an animal sensing danger, an inexplicable feeling washed over, puppeteering my body through sheer gut instinct. I fervently clung to the underside of the northern fence, moving towards the street. Each footstep deliberate in its placement, careful to avoid any dry leaves and twigs. Curiosity carried me forward as I reached the end of our property and stopped at the last post. Staring out into the street, surveying my surroundings, the unmistakable features of that coffin man from earlier came into view. The figure stood motionless on the neighbor's porch, head cocked to the side, listening. I held my breath in fear of his meticulous actions picking up on my unwanted audience. After what felt like an eternity, the stranger drew his pistol and with a weighty kick, smashed the door clear off its hinges. The bedlam which ensued was incomprehensible to my young mind. Immediately as the door fell to the ground, a high-pitched scream rung out, followed by stern commanding orders, being barked. The words "get my gun" and "who goes there" were distinct amidst the commotion of shuffling footsteps and knocked over furniture. Suddenly a pistol discharged and the windows on the first floor lit up like lightning. It was followed by a shriek of horror and 2 more low-caliber gunshots. "Damn it, Mary, shut your goddamn mouth," roared Old Man Wilkins from the second floor before a crack of a hunting rifle erupted. In between the gunfight, temporary moments of silence befell the residence before being broken once more by thundering bangs and flashes of white light. The stark contrast was surreal, almost dreamlike. I ran along the fence, peering into the slits, following in peril whatever carnage was ensuing. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of the stranger through a window, his large, shadowy figure, unshaken, gun at hand, walking headfirst into death's call. Other times my attention would be grabbed by the frantic, jittery movements of a panicked Wilkins, darting in and out of view on the second floor, rifle tightly clung to his chest. One of the upstairs windows slid open. From it plummeted Mrs. Wilkins out onto the backyard in her nightwear. She yelped like an injured dog when her ankle twisted upon impact, snapping like a dry rope. She fearfully dragged herself away from the house, screaming for help so forcefully her voice would fail. It was around then my young mind started to question how no one had been roused from their sleep. Houses stood mere feet apart from one another, and the ripping of bullets snapping throughout the night sky was unmistakable. Even the sheriff lived not but 4 doors away, a distance easily covered by the echoing chaos. I myself thought of running to help, waking my father, waking my brothers, riling them to action, but simply couldn't. My body moved itself, muscles uncooperative, logic hazed by the illusory situation. All I could do was stare at the spectacle as my blood curdled cold. Another bang of a rifle knelled, followed by 6 pistol shots. The windows of Wilkins' house fluoresced like a fireworks display. Then a loud grunt squawked, followed by a moment of oscillating silence before a single reverberating boom of a 12-gauge shattered the stillness one final time. Peace blanketed over the small town once more. Twilight began to break. Miss Wilkins had clawed her way under the oak tree on their property line before passing out. It was for the best, as soon after the stranger kicked open the rear door, hauling Mr. Wilkins' lifeless body into the backyard. Surprisingly, the stranger looked completely unscathed. Much like a bull, he was not out of breath in his unbroken stride, not fazed by the gouged body parts held together with strings of flesh. His stoic, collected demeanor prominent as he retrieved the coffin from behind the garden shack, likely having stowed it in secret before the assault. And unceremoniously he shoved Wilkins' corpse into it like old linen. Then he strapped the coffin to his back and sauntered off through the backyard into the desert, the march defying the weight bearing upon his shoulders. My pa always told me not to play in the desert behind our house, 'cause if I got lost, the nearest house was hundreds of miles away. That distance, any ill-prepared man would surely perish in the vast plains. And besides the stranger's coffin, he had not even a satchel. I stood there in disbelief as the silhouette of the man grew smaller and smaller, eventually disappearing into the horizon. Once out of sight, my body regained function, and I ran home screaming for help. Mrs. Wilkins was never the same. Once a spirited woman, now does not leave her house but for supplies. When townsfolk catch glimpses of her, she is bed-wrangled in appearance and melancholy in movement, frequently breaking down into tears. The sheriff made the case a priority for many years, maybe from the guilt of having slept through the ordeal, but progress never came. No evidence was collected, no witnesses other than myself, and inquiries with the Pinkertons brought forward no signs of bounty hunters or open investigations. Rather quickly, people moved on. The sheriff retired, and the incident was lost to time. My mind too had pushed out the memories of what happened that night. The dreamlike horror that befell our neighbor was simply too much for my soul to bear. It wasn't until last night, coincidentally on the 13th anniversary of the murder, that news broke of a man carrying a coffin on his back arriving into our town. Though, unfortunately this time, he had been asking for my name. Thank you so much for watching, guys. That was The Stranger. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it. Not much news today. I gotta say, my girlfriend originally did not like this story, only because some of the descriptions, like the calloused over knuckles and the missing fingerprints, to her sounded like this guy's an alien. Which, I mean, he could be. But, you know, I figured more badass killer who likes to fight than alien, but it could be an alien. Not putting it past that. Hopefully my cringe Louisiana accent made this a little more bearable for her. Well, I guess we'll see later. Also, I'm gonna let you know that next week it'll either be a very short video or some sort of video different from everything that's been going on. I think I need a week to kind of put all those podcasts out and open up those other sites to make this more accessible to people, like I've been saying. It turns out to be a little more work than I had anticipated, but regardless, follow me on social media, drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe, lets me know that you guys like what I'm doing, that I should keep doing it. And yeah, see you guys next week. Peace.